Hey to all metal maniacs and welcome to yet another video on the Iron Horde channel. Another video and another geographical area to invade, assess and consume all in the name of the heavy metal gods. If this is your first venture in the series of essential albums, then I invite you to follow this playlist and check out the various countries and heavy metal scenes we have already explored. For this video I have decided to go back to North America and visit the country of Canada. Now throughout the years, Canada with regards to heavy metal, it was always kind of in the shadow of the more notorious neighbor that is the United States. But I assure you that the albums being included in this list are second to none. So prepare that maple syrup, sit tight and let's go. Thanks for joining us again for this video. If you're new here, the aim of this channel is to review albums, festivals, suggest bands, delve in the cultural aspect of heavy metal in general and more. So if you're interested in this content, please consider subscribing to this channel, also liking and sharing our videos on social media. Now back to the music. I have to say Canada has always had a great reputation in the hard rock heavy metal world with bands like Triumph, Rush, April Wine, BTO, Steppenwolf, etc. But in the last few years this country seems to have exploded with new quality acts with regards to the traditional style. Bands like Cauldron, Striker, Axion, Traveler, Riot City, Metallian, Road Rash and many more. So it seems the 80s band from this region have left quite a good impression on these newer bands, and the indelible mark on the Canadian scene is still there shining through these bands. But who were these bands? And more importantly to today's video, which albums from the 80s did leave the biggest mark? So first album on this list is Messiah Force with the album The Last Day, released in 1987 by Hessium Records. This is possibly Canada's best kept secret, heavy metal verging on speed metal at times, with the great vocals of Lynn Renault, vocals which remind me of Doro tinged with that rougher, raspier touch that fits so well to this music. Similar as well to Kate from Acid, a Belgian speed metal band I included in the Belgian Dutch video of this series, link up here. In fact, Warlock, Hellion, Acid are all similar bands to Messiah Force. There are also similarities to US power metal bands as well, like Omen, Liege Lord and Savage Grace. Check out the video also I did on the USPM bands. So up-tempo tracks with some nice guitar solo and plenty of energy, that is what you get on this record, and every time I listen to this I still wonder how come this record is so obscure. If you like the previous bands I mentioned, then there is no way you won't be in awe of the music coming out of this record. Production is not bad but not great either, bass is only heard intermittently and the drums are a bit of a letdown with regards to the sound. On the other hand, the guitar tone is so good and the vocals are great in the mix as well. Highlight tracks for me would be Silent Tyrant, the sequel and the Hero Saga, but if I had to choose a favorite track it is Call from the Night. Next in line, Death Dealer with the album Keeper of the Flame, released in 1986 by Metal Blade Records. Do you miss the new wave of British heavy metal? Have you listened to all the albums which came out of that movement? I don't think so. Not even a lifetime would fulfill that task. And we're not complaining obviously, because more music to discover for us. Yet still Canada also heeded the call, and Death Dealer, or Dead Dealer as they were previously called, a name which they went back to from 2009 onwards, came up with this record. This is like a mix of Cloven Hoof, Raven, Iron Maiden, Angel Witch, Satan and a number of other new wave of British heavy metal bands. In fact, the UK pressing was released by Neat Records. I don't think there is even a weak track on here, one track after the other. This is really an old school metalhead's heaven. Vocals are like a mix of Jeff Tate and Russ North from cloven hoof. Great production, again great guitar tone, the drumming is top notch. Just listen to the instrumental on the wings of a Russian foxbat. Other great tracks like The Fugitive, Sadist and Dead Zone. The twin guitar attack really shines on this latter track. But if I had to choose my favorite track here, it would be the title track, Death Dealer. Third band on the list, and this is Sacred Blade with the album of the Sun and Moon, released in 1986 by Black Dragon Records. Black Dragon Records responsible for the release of some legendary albums such as Epicus from Candlemas, some 546 records from Manila Road, the two classic USPM albums by Savage Grace. This record, though, remained practically unknown to the wider audience, although it has become somewhat of a cult record in the underground scene. What can I say apart from the fact that this is another brilliant album, a mix of US power metal and prog metal. Take bands like Fate Warning, Heir Apparent, Crimson Glory, Queensryche, so if those bands are your daily bread, then you can't really miss this record. But anyone who's into heavy metal would do well to listen to this. Plenty of great riffs, some of the most tasty riffs actually you'll ever hear. Melody, guitar progression, over-the-top vocals combined with lyrics about science fiction and space. No surprise here considering the album title. This really makes the music feel so otherworldly. And the choice of this word is done on purpose, as Sacred Blade eventually changed their name to Otherworld in 2004, releasing another masterpiece in 2005. But let's focus on this record here. Highlight tracks would be Salem, In Light of the Moon, Of the Sun and Moon. To Lunar Winds is a rather calming instrumental, very aptly titled, but for my favorite track I'm going for the track Legacy. That mid-section guitar solo is just pure bliss. Next in line is the album Metallized by Sword, released in 1986 with Aquarius Records. From this list, this record is probably the first one I have ever discovered, even before some of the classic records I will be mentioning further on in this video. If you followed my previous videos, you know that every now and then I mention an album which, at the time of discovery and of discovering it, I end up fixated on that record, playing it over and over again. This is another of those albums. And even the follow-up album to this, which is quite good as well, but not nearly as good as Metallized is. What we have here is a lesson in traditional metal, basically. Grungy guitars, great riffs, catchy melodies, and great rough, soaring vocals, which in part remind me of Dee Snider. Also, a good portion of the greatness of this record is in the production, a perfect bullseye from the audio engineer, whoever he is. The tracks are straight to the point, averaging around the 4-minute mark. One of those records that you will immediately fall in love with, and like I did, you'll want to play it over and over again. Although the tracks are short, each track still holds its own identity and the record doesn't get repetitive at all. Highlight tracks are Out of Control, The End of the Night and Runaway. But my favorite track on here would be Children of Heaven. Next album is Metal Inquisition by Piledriver, released in 1984 with Cobra Records. And if you're not a metalhead, you might as well be dead. And those are the words of Piledriver, an album that greets you with this phrase from the very first track. Well then, as far as I'm concerned, it surely grabs my attention. Gord Kirchen, aka Piledriver, is a cult figure in the heavy metal scene. On stage he dons that sadomasochist attire with leather and spikes, which you will not forget easily. But in reality he doesn't take himself so seriously. He plays on the cliches, and this is a big part of the entire package of the band and this album. But this doesn't mean that this album lacks from the music point. On the contrary, this is a very good record. It's like a mix of Merciful Fate, Nasty Savage and a touch of US power metal, bordering with thrash metal at times, with plenty of catchy riffs and Piledriver's abrasive, menacing vocals. Check out tracks like Sex with Satan and Alien Rape. The slower also and doomier Witch Hunt is another highlight of this album. But my favorite remains the title track. We're the metal Inquisition, we sentence you to death by Voivod. Next album is Walking the Razor's Edge by Helix, released in 1984 with Capitol Records. A record that I have discovered quite recently. The music here is more hard rock with some parts leaning towards heavy metal. It's like a mix of Crocus, Skid Row and the catchy hard rock metal that was so popular in the US during the mid-80s with bands like Whitesnake, Motley Crue, Twisted Sister, etc. And I have to say, this is a proper solid album in this regard. This kind of music is sometimes referred to as arena rock. Anyways, great production, great vocals and great guitar solos. The tracks are very catchy, making this an overall great record. In fact, this record reached double platinum in Canada. It helped them tour with Whitesnake, Quiet Riot, Motorhead and Triumph. There are two great covers here in Gimme Gimme Good Lovin' and Make Me Do Anything You Want. Although I don't necessarily agree with including two covers in a full length, but these two tracks are pretty well done. Other highlight tracks are Rock You, When the Hammer Falls, You Keep Me Rockin' and Feel the Fire. This last track has a Crocus riff in it, but at the time of preparing this video I couldn't remember which track it is taken from. Now obviously once I finish the recording this will pop in my mind, but anyways, let me know in the comments if you recognize it. My favorite track here would be Young and Reckless. Now reaching the section with some of the heavy metal classic albums, and the first one is by the band Voivod and the album War and Pain, released in 1984 with Metal Blade Records. Well, I always try to keep this list strictly traditional metal, with speed metal being the biggest stretch. But although this record by Voivod is considered as thrash metal, I still wanted to include them as an essential album from Canadian heavy metal, because such a list without Voivod would not be complete. In order to go around the rules, I will say that this record has elements of speed metal as well, so therefore I'm basically excused. This is their debut album, and what a way to start off. I admit it took me quite a number of years to get into their music, but once I did, I started appreciating even their weirdest compositions. Although there is nothing weird here, but only crushing and frantic heavy metal. The production is very punkish, for lack of a better term. There's that underlying Motorhead vibe going on, and what better way to start your discography with a solid scream of Voivod from the track that bears the same name. I always felt that it was like the christening of this band. The tempo never stops though. Tracks like Suck Your Bone, Iron Gang and Blower are full speed ahead. War and Pain starts off with a very doomy Black Sabbath-y riff and then explodes in some more frantic tempos, including a great guitar solo by Dennis Damour aka Piggy. But my favorite here is the closing epic Nuclear War, with its marching riff as if you're really on your way to a nuclear war. It has some progressive elements as well, which hint towards the direction Voivod would actually take in their future releases. Anyways, a landmark band and a landmark album in Canada's heavy metal scene. Now it is the turn of Metal on Metal by Anvil, released in 1982 with Attic Records. Chronologically, the album that was released first from the albums on this list, and undoubtedly one of the first heavy metal records to come out of Canada. This is actually the second album by Anvil, but their debut leans more towards hard rock, and even the overall performance of the band is of a higher level on this record. Definitely they were heavily influenced by the new wave of British heavy metal. And because this record was such a groundbreaking record, one would have expected to have a bigger success. Yet the mix of hard rock tracks like Stop Me, vocals by guitarist Dave Ellison, tag team and scenery kind of contrast with the heavier tracks like Metal on Metal, March of the Crabs and 666. It was kind of too late for the 70s hard rock crowd, but too early for the heavy metal explosion. And when this came, the music of Anvil didn't sound so heavy in comparison to the thrash bands that were coming out at the time. But make no mistake, this is a very solid record which later got the recognition it deserves, especially with the successful documentary about the band titled The Story of Anvil in 2008, which kind of gave them a new life. Favorite track would be Tease Me, Please Me, a total Judas Priest worship track. So the last two records here, and quite possibly my two favorite bands ever to come out of Canada. The first one is by the legendary Razor with the album titled Executioners, song released in 1985 with Viper Records. What can I say about this band other than the fact that they spent their whole career giving us one speed metal anthem after another. From this debut record, they immediately made things clear from the very first few notes on the track Take This Torch. Stace McLaren, aka Sheepdog, with those kind of forced and stretched, raspy in your face vocals, and the high-pitched screams which gave this music such a frantic feel, where your blood starts pumping and all you want is to start destroying things. This is Razor, the quintessential speed metal band with 8 great full-length albums under their belt. As far as the tracks go, these are relatively short and to the point in perfect speed metal fashion. Dave Carl on guitars blasts out a ton of riffs and alternates aggressivity and some smooth guitar solo so easily, bass is quite audible as well, and drums do their part quite well. Highlight tracks for me would be Fast and Loud, Escape the Fire, March of the Dead, Hot Metal, Gatecrasher. I can almost name all the tracks, but hope you get the idea of how essential this album is and Razor are. Favorite overall track would be Time Bomb. And last but definitely not least, I have for you the last record. I hope you have guessed which one it is by now, and it is none other than Heavy Metal Maniac by Exciter, released in 1983 with Shrapnel Records. From the album title to the iconic cover art to the music to the production, everything is as close to perfection as you can get on this record. Over the years, the band had numerous lineup changes with original members coming and going. This debut record featured John Ritchie on guitars, Alan Johnson on bass, and Dan Beeler on drums and also vocal. Actually, he's one of the most iconic drummer vocalists in the heavy metal scene. Like Razor, what we have here is some more relentless speed metal, although Exciter's speed metal is closer to the traditional heavy metal, contrary to Razor's being closer to the thrash metal. Iron Dogs might be the only mid-paced track on here, and also Black Witch is a nice power ballad with a great ending guitar solo. Both tracks fit quite well with the other speed metal classics like Mistress of Evil, Cry of the Banshee, Under the Attack, Rising of the Dead. Sometimes when I'm listening to the music here, the influence of Motorhead comes to mind, and I remind myself how influential this band and other classic bands were and their legacy. In the end, if I have to choose a track, I'll play it safe and say Heavy Metal Maniac. The first time I heard this track, I played it over and over again for countless days on end, even before moving to the rest of the album. I warned you already that I sometimes get obsessed with these specific tracks or albums, and I want to play them over and over again. Anyways, one of the most essential albums ever, not only for the scene in Canada. So those were the 10 albums from the Canadian 80s heavy metal scene. I hoped you liked these choices, and maybe I helped you discover also some new bands as well. In the end, that is the reason behind these videos. If you have any suggestions with regards to this list, and not only, please write them down in the comments below. We've been having some great discussions under each video. I even discovered myself new bands from these suggestions. A reminder also to subscribe and share, like and click on the bell if you're finding this content interesting. Until the next one, stay safe and metal on. Cheers.